James and I stand in the negation that states should maintain, adopt, and implement policies and measures that they deem appropriate for the protection and promotion of the diversity of cultural expressions on their territory. There are three reasons to vote negative in this round. First, the affirmative has not proved every aspect of the resolution is desirable. I will explain how the rejection of market ideals means that they have not affirmed the resolution. Second, culture is constantly evolving, taking on new meaning and rejecting the outdated. That means government intervention to protect cultural expression may not only fail, but be counterproductive, repressing true cultural expression. Third, the market approach which the affirmative rejects is the best way to effectively and objectively promote a diversity of cultural expression. The resolution's wording, as well as the affirmative's interpretation, suggests that the affirmative must defend that the state ultimately decide what cultural diversity is and then implement policies to either protect or promote it. This round is a question of whether or not the state should decide what cultural diversity is. The affirmative has not upheld their burden to prove the maintenance of policies is good. The resolution says states should maintain, adopt, and implement policies. The conjunction "and" means that the affirmative has to defend that status quo protection measures are good. The first affirmative, constructive, is entirely about adopting a completely new evaluation criteria for culture and a new way in which to protect it. Rejecting status quo market approaches is counter to this. Therefore, before evaluating the substantive benefits of the affirmative's case, you must vote negative because they have not met every aspect of their burden in affirming the resolution. The first affirmative says that they must meet either of two criteria: prove that states will protect cultures only if they are on the brink of extinction, or if people within states desire cultural protection. They must defend both of these situations because anything absent that means the affirmative is a conditional affirmation of the resolution. That states should only protect culture in certain instances is counter to the thesis of the first affirmative. This selective ethic that the first affirmative defend picks winners and losers from the get-go, therefore circumventing any benefit government protection may bring. If the government begins devising cultural policies by saying, there are certain instances in which we don't have to protect culture, then policymakers will devise inherently anti-cultural policies. Now, he says that culture has intrinsic value, and the tyranny of the majority will wipe out diversity. This does not make any sense in the context of culture. Culture certainly has intrinsic value, but only in the abstract sense of the word. The category of culture carries inherent worth to society. However, that does not mean that certain expressions of culture are necessarily valuable. It is hard to defend, for example, expressing culture via a crusade or ethnic cleansing is valuable to society. Our focus cannot be whether or not culture is good or bad, but rather we should focus on the way in which we express value. Both the affirmative and the negative agree that culture is a carrier of communal values. This is an important definition. Culture conveys what people value. If this is the case, the affirmative team has contradicted themselves. If the majority, no matter how tyrannical it is, deems it values only one or two things, then that is by definition cultural value. Even if a certain aspect of culture were at a brink of extinction, governmental intervention to protect values that individuals do not even care about is an artificial inflation of certain values that have no meaning in the first place. Of course, the government can protecting culture is a good idea in the abstract, but in practice, the state fails to account for what people actually care about. When people have stopped caring about a certain aspect of culture, that suggests that cultural artifact no longer carries value. It has stopped being culture. This idea suggests that culture is constantly evolving. What is no longer cared about is, by definition, not cultural value. It no longer represents what a community holds dear. However, even though culture may spit out certain aspects of society it deems are no longer valuable, it always takes in new aspects and ideas that society has placed new value upon. This is an iterative process that cultural diversity takes, one that is constantly changing and in flux. James and I believe that this inevitable and constant variation in cultural diversity means that the market is the best way to address cultural diversity. The affirmative must defend that government intervention is good. The negative contends that either a limit on state action or a completely free market approach is comparatively better. The affirmative falsely equates the economic value of culture to money. David Throsby, an economics professor, defines economic value as that, quote, which is not synonymous with financial or commercial value, although it is ultimately expressible in terms of either a numeric good or preferably money, comprises any direct use of the values of the cultural good or service in question, plus whatever non-market values it may give rise to. Yes, money may represent cultural value in certain instances, but that does not reduce cultural artifacts to matters of mere finance. After all, money is simply a physical representation of what individuals value in the face of scarcity. Throsby continues, cultural value on the other hand is multidimensional, unstable, contested, and lacks a common unit of account and may contain elements that cannot be easily expressed according to any quantitative or qualitative scale. The affirmative's rejection of market approaches means that when the state attempts to protect culture, they will fail to properly address the issue on hand. Throsby concludes, trade-offs are inevitable in this life, but cultural value is likely to influence people's decision-making in regard to cultural goods, and might therefore affect desirable patterns of resource allocation. It is inevitable that some inner part of humans will factor externalities associated with culture into our promotion of culture. The negative market approach not only provides a solid criteria grounded in more concrete methods of promoting cultural diversity, it also means that we inevitably take into account the affirmative's concerns about the abstract values conveyed by culture. In actuality, the status quo's approach to cultural diversity resolves the affirmative's concerns while avoiding messy bureaucracy that will always accompany state action. The better alternative is the one offered by the negative because it allows individuals with a plurality of different individual experiences to promote diversity as is most fitting of cultural diversity, allowing the people to emphasize what they hold most dear. It also allows them to lobby their respective governments and promote their own modes of expression. The affirmative is a top-down approach. We would like to defend a bottom-up approach, one that is more authentically diverse. These approaches seem to be better in the context of cultural disputes. For example, according to Francesco Francioni, professor of international law and human rights at the European University Institute, the prosecution of Marianne True, former curator of the Getty Museum, for her alleged implication in the Medici connection, paved the way for agreements between the Italian government and several major U.S. museums. Likewise, one can see the effectiveness of individuals in determining cultural diversity in everyday life when each individual comes together and shares their experiences. The same exact cultural expression may not be the same, but that is the point of culture, to constantly evolve and integrate new points of view that in the end point towards something brighter. In order to promote a better understanding of what it means to be culturally diverse, the government should not arbitrarily decide what it means to be diverse or what it means to express diversity. The affirmative is great in the abstract, but in practice, expression of diversity must begin with the very roots of culture, individuals themselves.